Supergirl and Thacker and Superman is one of the most iconic superheroes ever created, which was 86 years ago. Everyone knows Superman. So to celebrate a new version of Superman, which is seemingly here to stay for a while, I thought we'd take a look back into many movies of Superman. And just to clarify, I will only be doing the live-action and theatrically released Superman movies. I learned my lesson from the Muppets movie history. I'm not doing that again.
I'm not making the same mistakes again.
No, you're making all new ones.
In 1978, Superman the movie would be released. Directed by Richard Donner, written by Mario Puzo, David Newman, Leslie Newman, and Robert Benton. Starring Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, and Marlon Brando, just to name a few. It made $300 million on a budget of $55 million. At the time, it was the most expensive film ever made. It has great reviews. And yet, somehow, was only the second exclusive film in 1978, being behind Grease. Production of Superman the movie began in 1973. It would actually be filmed back to back with Superman 2, but we'll get that later. There were many different people DC was considering for Superman, including Muhammad Ali, Al Pacino, James Caan, Steve McQueen, Clint Eastwood, and Dustin Hoffman, just to name a few. But of course, Christopher Reeve would end up getting the role. Many directors were also considered, including Francis Ford Coppola, William Friedkin, Richard Lester, Peter Yates, John Gullerman, Ronald D. Main, Sam Peckinpah, George Lucas, Guy Hamilton, Mark Robinson, and Steven Spielberg. But eventually it ended up being directed by Richard Donner. So with Superman being a super success, a sequel was going to happen faster than a speeding bullet, and as mentioned, it was already filmed. In 1981, Superman 2 will be released, directed by Richard Lester, written by Mario Puzo, David Newman, and Leslie Newman, starring Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, and Sarah Delish, to name a few. It made $216.3 million on a budget of $54 million. It has very good reviews. Donner originally turned to direct this film. Bad retention on set, he was originally fired and replaced by Richard Lester. Although in 2006, Superman 2 The Richard Donner Cut was released. So in the end, everything turned out well. In 1983, Superman 3 will be released. Directed by Richard Lester and written by David Newman and Leslie Newman. Starring Christopher Reeve, Richard Pryor, and Mark McClure, just to name a few. It made $80.2 million on a budget of $39 million, and didn't get very good reviews. I'm not going to ramble about the original idea for this movie. Brainiac is portrayed as a surrogate father to Supergirl, and eventually falls in love with his surrogate daughter, who did not reciprocate his feelings, as she didn't fall in love with Superman. Brainiac retaliates by using a personality machine to corrupt and manipulate Superman. The climax of the film would have seen Superman, Supergirl, Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, and Brainiac time travel to the Middle Ages for a final battle against Brainiac. After defeating him and leaving Brainiac behind, Superman and Supergirl would have a wedding at the end of Superman 3 or Superman 4. Now, keep in mind, in most iterations of Superman and Supergirl, they are cousins. Now, I assume in this version they weren't going to be cousins. But still, I don't want that image in my head. But eventually this version of the film was scrapped, being too complex and probably too expensive. Probably for the best. In 1984, Supergirl will be released. Directed by Enoch Schwartz, and written by David Odell, starring Helen Slater, Faye Dunaway, and Hart Bochner, just to name a few. It made $14.3 million on a budget of $35 million, and is terrible. Supergirl was originally planned to show up in Superman 2, and that would have led to her own movie, but of course that didn't happen. And fun fact, Dolly Parton turned on the role of Selena, this movie's villain. I like Dolly, but wow, that would have made this movie somehow even worse. In 1987, Superman 4 The Quest for Peace will be released. Directed by Sidney J. Faree, written by Lawrence Connor, and Mark David Rosenthal, starring Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, and Mark McClure, just to name a few. It made $36.7 million on a budget of $17 million, and got pretty darn bad reviews. Reeve was briefly considered to be the film's director, but it was decided that he didn't have enough directing experience. And Wes Craven was also briefly signed to direct. Yeah, the guy who made Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream. Superman vs. Freddy Krueger win? But he and Reeve didn't get along very well, and Reeve demanded a new director to be hired. So he was let go and Sidney was hired. In 2006, Superman Returns will be released. Directed by Bryan Singer, written by Michael Daugherty, and Dan Harris. Starring Brandon Roth, Kate Bosworth, and James Marsden, just to name a few. It made $291.1 million on a budget between $204 million and $223 million, and got pretty good reviews. Although while yes, it did make a profit, becoming the 9th exclusive film in 2006, it wasn't the profit Warner Bros. Was looking for, and a sequel was cancelled. In 2013, Man of Steel will be released, directed by Zack Snyder, written by David S. Goyer, starring Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, and Michael Shannon, just to name a few. It made $270.1 million on a budget between 225 and 258 million, becoming the 9th highest grossing film of 2013, and got generally mixed reviews. In 2016, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice will be released. Directed by Zack Snyder, written by Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer, starring Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, and Amy Adams to name a few. It made $874.4 million on a budget between 250 and 325 million, and got generally pretty negative reviews, becoming the 7th highest grossing film of 2016. And some more fun facts. When this movie was originally pitched in the early 2000s, Warner Brothers wanted Johnny Depp for Batman. What?
What are you? I'm Captain Jack Sparrow.
And a potential title for this film was Son of Sun and Night of Night. What? In 1025, Superman will be released. Directed and written by James Gunn, starring David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, and Nicholas Hoult, to name a few. At the moment, it's made $600 million on a budget of $225 million. And it's truly the 6th highest grossing film of this year, and has gotten very good reviews. So 9 movies later, what's next for Superman? Well, next year we have Supergirl to look forward to, and the CEO of Warner Brothers, David Zaslav, leaked that James Gunn is currently developing the next film in the so-called Superman family, meaning that more likely than not, we're getting at least a few more Superman movies. Also, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. Bye guys for now, bye-bye, Thacker.